First, I'd like to say that I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. This is my third year in college baseball, so I've never really had the opportunity to do anything like this. First, on our pitching development, I think our situation is a little bit more unique. TP's 26 years older than me, so from a philosophy standpoint, he teaches me a lot of things. In the modern era, I got done playing 3 years ago. So I get to teach him a lot of things about the technology we have, and some more pitching development things, in the newer age. But first, I'd like to start off with, our 3 pillars of pitching development. I think these are all staples that, we try to hit on every single day and things that really matter to us. The first one is individualism. And, the first point is that understanding that each pitcher is different and should be different from the rest, right? If you look at all of our guys, they all have different levels, of athleticism, mobility, strength, conditioning, things that we have to target. But, I think that plays a big part in our recruiting process as well, right? If you look at our 21 guys right now, none of them throw the same, they don't move the same, and that's something we value, right? We want to have different looks on our pitching staff, and also make everybody feel comfortable with being different. Each development plan we create is different, right? And, you heard Coach Knapp, just talk about it, but we don't like to cookie cut guys, right? We don't want to have all of our right-handed pitchers move the same, throw from the same arm angle, have the same arsenal at the end of the day. For us, we value different pitch shapes, we value different fastball platforms, right? And our goal is, from a development plan standpoint, is to maximize each pitcher's potential, right? My next point is that, we want to take our pitcher's strengths and continue to make them better, right? And also, going along with that, we want to raise our pitcher's weaknesses to become strength. We have certain guys that their fastball is their best pitch, right? And, for us, we can't have them just continuously rely on just that pitch. So our goal is to take their secondaries, either from a shape standpoint or a command standpoint, and continue to increase that each and every day. And again, understanding how each pitcher learns best, right? We have guys that we bring in and watch video, and they see, mechanical flaws in their mind or that we have for them. They can sit there and watch the video, they can go out there in 15 minutes, and then from there, they can make the adjustments themselves, or we guide them through it. We have some guys that are more hands-on, right? There are times where I flip them plyo balls for them to feel looseness, or also use PVC pipes, different training tools, but it requires us to be more hands-on with them. The next thing, I think, a lot of guys now, with social media, especially, the older they get, they want to watch professional pitchers, they want to watch the Paul Skeens of the world, they want to emulate their mechanics, right? And, some simple questions that I ask them, from mechanical analysis is, are you as strong as Paul Skeens? Are you as mobile as him? Do you move the same way? Do you have the same athleticism? For about 99% of our guys, they'll tell you that they can't do any of the same things Paul Skeens does. So, for us, what we tell them is, don't try to be like Paul Skeens, be the best version of yourself, right? Again, we want to maximize each individual's potential. And again, there's no such thing as perfect mechanics overall. There's perfect mechanics for that each individual pitcher. The next thing in our pillars are relationships, right? We want to build a sense of trust, on our end with our pitcher, and we want them to trust us at the end of the day. Again, creating trust with your pitcher and belief in your development plan is key, right? A lot of what we do is not so much of dictating, but a lot more of open conversations, right? We bounce ideas off of each other between us, and then we bounce ideas off of our pitchers, right? We want them to have ownership in their development process. Just like Knapp said, right? He can tell them a set of drills to do, but if they don't believe in it, they're not going to do it every day, right? It's the same thing on our end. We can tell them to do something, they don't believe in it, they're not going to do it. So we have a lot of discussions. We have a lot of meetings with our guys. We meet with our guys to watch video once or twice a week. And that can just range from a variety of things, from mechanics, stuff, and just in-game performance as well. The next thing, I think, having comfort that your plan might not work at first, right? We had an individual over winter break, his velocity was down in his bullpens. I suggested a mechanical change. It didn't feel comfortable for him at first. So we went back to the drawing board, right? Always learning is something that was tough for me coming right out of playing. I thought, just because I did things a certain way that it would work for everyone, right? Understanding how each individual learns and also what is best for them. And then communication. TP and I's doors are always open for our players. We have guys, we send out a schedule for them to come in for meetings, when we have availability. But also at the end of the day, some guys just come up and want to watch video on their own. Creating discussions is the biggest thing, right? We don't want to dictate a lot of what we do to them, but give them the freedom to raise questions, understanding why they're doing certain plyo drills, understanding why we're making certain mechanical changes, and again, it's all in their best interest in getting them to buy into what we're prescribing for them to do. And I think what that does is it creates a learning of themselves as a pitcher in the game itself, right? I think, for me, getting out of college 3 years ago, and I think it's a growing trend, is, a lot of younger guys nowadays at our level, they don't really pay attention to the game. They look at pitching as just stuff, throwing hard, making things look cool at the end of the day. And I think, a lot of learning the game itself, understanding how a hitter swings, understanding why we threw certain sequences to hitters is just kind of, dwindled down a little bit. And again, the goal is to make them their own coach, right? We don't want to sit there and just not yell, but, correct every mechanical flaw in every pitch, but also we want to help them, we want to guide them on those things, but we want to make them understanding, what the adjustment is that they need to make on their own versus us having to tell them every single time. I'm going to dive into some of our pre-throwing things. One thing I think that gets forgotten about a lot is an adequate dynamic warm-up, right, that targets all areas of the body. I think for the vast majority, a lot of our guys do a tremendous job. They come out every day. Our strength coach, has designed a very good dynamic warm-up for our guys that targets all areas of the body. That should take about 8 to 10 minutes. Some of our guys, have more extended dynamic warm-ups that they want to incorporate stuff on their own, but also some guys stick in that 8 to 10 minute range. The next thing, I think it should be a staple for everybody as a pitcher, but foam rolling, mobility, and soft tissue work, right? We want to push our guys in the weight room to reach their max strength potential for themselves. So in turn with that, they also have to properly warm up their body from a soft tissue standpoint if they're feeling sore from certain, weightlifting techniques, but also just making sure we're getting a full total body warm up so they feel, loose enough and stretched enough to throw. The next thing, PVC pipes, right? They're very, affordable. We have a ton of them, but I think they're great for loosening up the spine, right? A lot of our guys, they think they can still hit and that they're two-way players if they're freshmen or some older guys that are still trying to live out a dream, right? They just swing it to swing it, right? They'll take the PVC pipe, they'll swing it as hard as they can once or twice, or sometimes, I know Coach Knapp, described a walkthrough drill, but a lot of our guys will walk 3 or 4 times, they'll just swing it as hard as they can to loosen up their spine. And what I think in turn that creates is it creates fast movers, right? We want, from a mechanical analysis, all of our guys to move at a body tempo that's best for them, and also it creates better rotation skills. Band work, touching on that, it differs between all of our guys. We have a guy that does 15 minutes worth of bands. We have guys that do 5 minutes worth of bands. And for us, creating routines for each individual is key, right? It's going to differ if some guys want to do plyos. We don't prescribe plyos for everybody. It just depends on what makes them feel the best before they pick up the baseball. Plyo balls, med balls, and mound work. I think the biggest thing is creating some type of throwing action to prime the body, right? In today's day and age, plyos have just grown tremendously, and I think it's just something that is important to throw something either heavier or sometimes lighter, depending on what you're working on with the guy, to prime the body before we throw. Mechanical work, it differs for each guy, and for us, it targets areas of development for each individual before they throw a baseball. Some of our guys like to go through dry reps to feel certain positions that we've talked about with them. Some guys, like to do plyo balls on the mound, right? It kind of just depends on what each individual needs on that daily basis. Going to dive into some plyo stuff here. We believe in that there's two types of plyos, right? There's some plyos that are designed for arm health, just a couple of them: reverse throws, pivot picks, external rotation, and trampoline catches. We believe in that all of these are designed to increase strength and health for the shoulder. We're fortunate enough, to work with Marv Baseball. They have great plyos, but for these plyos that are designed for arm health, those should be between 14 and 10 ounces, right? Those are heavier. We want to create stability in the shoulder. We want to maintain good shoulder health. Unfortunately, we just had a young man go down with a torn labrum. That's a tough injury to come back from, but we put an emphasis on keeping a healthy shoulder at all times. The next one, is mechanical focus. This is what we use to target areas of development such as arm path, tempo, and lower body mechanics. For those weights, we try not to really exceed anything heavier than 7.5 ounces. That's 2.5, heavier than baseball. But, again, and what we do is, we want to have transferability from flat ground work to the mound, right? We have some guys that have a tough time with, transferring over what they do in a flat ground setting to a mound, right? We tell all of our guys, you're going to pitch off the mound, you're not going to pitch, obviously, off the flat ground. This is a short video clip. This young man right here, he was having issues. He's a long levers guy with a high front side. So what we were trying to target in the plyo setting was him feeling his arm pulling back, and incorporating the scap. He was having issues. He said he was feeling tense. It didn't feel easy for him to throw. He was actually pushing his arm back towards second base, and kind of showing the ball towards second base. But, I think when we do plyos, we want to incorporate as much focus on positions that they get to in their own delivery. We have a couple guys, and I tell guys all the time, especially in plyos, they get to positions that they'll never actually get to in their pitching delivery, so it kind of just negates what they're, negates what they're trying to do. Again, the focus of this drill for him was to feel his arm moving down and loose. Again, he was having issues feeling tense and pushing his arm swing towards second base. This next drill that we did, this is more of a tempo focus. For him, he's a quick and athletic mover. He was having issues of being too slow in his delivery, and then in turn from there, he was speeding himself up late, so his arm was becoming late. This is a simple step back drill with an emphasis for him of when his back foot hits the ground, exploding out at one tempo. And these are things too, right? We're working in a flat ground setting right here because we just didn't want to get him on the mound right when we were doing this. We have a couple guys that they only want to do plyos off the mound because they're having a tougher time doing it in a flat ground setting and transferring it over to the mound. Next thing, throwing program. For us, we want to incorporate as much athletic movement into our throwing program. What we believe in is we don't want to create mechanical robots and just focusing on mechanics and from a pitching delivery at all times. For us, we want athletic movers and throwers at all times. Moving athletically, what we believe in, it also challenges command and focus. I'm going to put up on this next slide our throwing program. But for us, in the athletic throw segment of what we call it, we actually do a lot of football style rollouts as quarterbacks. The emphasis for them is not just to do the drill to do it and spray the ball all over the place, but to also focus on commanding the baseball at all times. The next big staple in our throwing program is managing distance, effort, and volume, right? And we build our throwing programs for our guys in the off-season and also in-season. Things that we tend to focus on are understanding when to have high-intent days and low-intent days. For the most part, our high-intent days are usually our bullpen days, game days. For our relievers, they have to train at a higher intent all the time because we expect them to pitch sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. The next thing I'm going to dive into, for your guys that are sinker guys or more two-seam guys, we want to keep them at a max distance of 150 feet, for us. The emphasis with that is for our sinker guys, we don't want them to ever feel like they're underneath the baseball. We always want them to feel like they're on top of the baseball and commanding at the bottom part of the zone. Same thing for your two-seam guys. For us, we don't really want our two-seam guys throwing fastballs at the top of the zone. Metrically, it flattens out and it's easier for a hitter to hit. For our ride, fastball guys and hold guys, max distance long toss with an emphasis on, on head height. We want those guys to be able to backspin the baseball as far as they can, with the emphasis of keeping it at head height at all times, just so that way they can focus on commanding the baseball at the top of the zone. This is our throwing program, that we give our guys on a daily basis. At the top right here, you'll see that all of these drills are designed for 3 minutes, and the pace varies depending on the pitcher. We like to keep it at a 3-minute clock for each thing. And, the big emphasis that we tell our guys is, hey, this isn't, machine gunning it, right? Early on, we have some freshmen that just throw the ball as much as they can at a 3-minute segment. We want them to focus on pace and tempo and quality of the throw versus just letting them rip all the time. This end segment right here, and I'll dive into it next, our movement catch is a flat ground segment. We always like to end our throwing program with picks, right? That's a staple of what we do outside of just pitching development from, a mechanical analysis and from an arsenal standpoint. But we always want our guys to end with picks, just so that way when we transition to it, in the fall, when we get to team practice, and even in the season, that way we have that, we have the footwork master and we have the accuracy master. And then command emphasis on our program. I touched on it a little bit, but our sinker and two-seam guys, we want them, sinker and two-seam guys, we want them belly button and hip to hip. This allows them to work, on different starting points based on the movement profile of their fastball, and this is when their partner is standing, right? We want them to command the baseball both inside and outside of the plate, and also at a good height that they can transfer over when they get to a flat ground segment and also when they can get to the mound. Our ride and hold guys, we're working belly button and above, no higher really than the chest when they're about 60 feet. It allows them to focus on keeping their fastball above the thigh and belt area on hitter. And again, this is when your throwing partner is standing versus in a crouch. For flat grounds, again, we finish every throwing session on non-bullpen days with a flat ground. We try to keep this between 12 to 15 pitches at 55 to 60 feet and 75 to 85%. We have some guys that don't know what 75 to 85% is, and they're just cutting it loose and trying to kill their partner at times. Our flat grounds are designed for feel, again, not max effort. We believe in training release point, starting point, and shape on all their pitches. We believe that if they can command a pitch at 55 feet, it's an easier adjustment when they move 5 feet back to feel the same release point that they felt there. One thing that TP introduced to me that I never did before as a player and in my year coaching prior to Winthrop is we will throw all of our flat grounds with the home plate down, so we're training the same way that we do when we step on the mound. Then touching on bullpen and mound sessions, we believe in touching the slope more than a bullpen day and in-game appearance is crucial. Again, we want our guys to be able to transfer everything they do from a flat ground standpoint in the outfield over to the mound as easy as possible. Our guys touch the slope 2 to 3 times a week outside of in-game appearances or relievers. Sometimes they even like to touch it before they get in a game, pre-game, right after BP and right after we conduct our throwing program. It doesn't have to be a game-like effort, but game-like focus and tempo. This past week, we had 2 young men on our pitching staff. In their bullpens, they like to speed everything up, and in turn, it sped them up in the game. So what we, told them was, hey, treat it like you're getting a sign. For us, we have technology that we relay all of our signs in, but understanding that tempo and focus matter more than the amount of throws or quality of pitches that you have. We don't typically script out bullpens. We target areas of development and maintain areas that they're proficient in. This past week, again, we had a young man that was struggling with the command of his slider and his curveball, so that was the main focus of the bullpen. And for him, he's a ride fastball guy, so we wanted to maintain keeping the fastball at the top of the zone. All of our bullpens are focused on strike percentage and pitch execution. Our first 2 weeks when we get there in the fall and we're throwing bullpens, we chart every pitch that they throw, whether it's a ball or strike, and whether they executed the pitch in that setting. Last thing I want to touch on, pitching development with basic technology. I know we're very fortunate to have TrackMan. We're very fortunate enough to have 6 camera angles that we can show to our pitchers at all times. These next 2 videos I actually shot on my iPhone in slow motion. You can see right here, for him, he's a higher arm slot guy. We want to keep the fastball at the top portion of the zone. He executes this pitch right here. His big issue is, he tends to lower his release height when it comes to spinning, right? He likes to drop it down here, try to create bigger movements, when in turn, when he's at his best, the spin is shorter in a movement profile and it's executed well. And the cool thing about this was we could make that adjustment instantly with him from a pitch-to-pitch standpoint instead of waiting for the video to upload and then in turn it's a day after adjustment. Then I put my contact info up here. Any questions you guys might have, if you'd like the PowerPoint. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to me.